Our host, Facebook/Instagram, is going to give us a talk about using Python 3. And to give that talk, we have Jason Fried. Please give him a round of applause.
Thank you. My name is Jason Fried. I'm a production engineer here at Facebook. I've been here since October 2011, on Halloween even. I taught myself Python because it was the more socially acceptable language at Facebook than Perl. It took about a year until I was really confident enough as a new Python programmer to start taking an active role in the community at Facebook. So I initially got started by helping people out in the internal Python group, being kind of the first to answer questions because I guess I didn't have a lot of time as a new hire, or I had a lot of time as a new hire. I kind of became internally famous in Python circles, and when I saw an issue that we were just doing something wrong, I just stepped in and I fixed it. It's not like I owned it, I just did it. So over time, people started to accept my expertise. This is mostly how Facebook works. It's not top down, there's no decrees, it's kind of a meritocracy of ideas. You have to sway public opinion by the merit of your ideas, or you kind of try to cash in some of your social capital from helping people to convince them that your ideas have merit. So here's a little timeline of our change for getting to Python 3. So changing something this big at a company as large as Facebook takes time. So let me tell you a story about during our free time and with no authority whatsoever, we made Python 3 the default version for Python at Facebook. In 2013, at the same time we were getting access to Python 2.7, we got access to Python 3.3, which is a lot different than what Python 3 is today, but it was part of a task to add Python 3 to our build system. Well, that task had been stalled since late 2012. It was blocking on adding Python 3 to our internal libraries, which can't be added unless we can build them. It's kind of a weird circular problem. So this didn't really get us much. It was like you would just install Python 3 on your laptop. It doesn't mean I can run it across the servers at Facebook. So sure, we had it. It was there, but nothing supported it yet. You couldn't use it. It was very theoretical. So it also didn't help that the popular opinion of Python 3 at Facebook during 2013 was really negative. Most people in the company were either planning on staying in Python 2 forever kind of mentality. Oh, we'll just be in Python 2.7 forever. And some people were talking about jumping to another language altogether. And I even, I said something along these lines internally once, and in my defense, it looked pretty hopeless in 2013 that we would ever be able to run Python 3 in production. Well, at the time, only one person, this was 2013, only one person called me out on my statement and said, why don't you do something about it? Because I was just complaining, So it wasn't all bad. We had some rays of hope. We had this thing, so somebody decided, they foresaw that Python 3 was coming down the road, and they were like, how can I make my Python 2.7 code live longer? How can I make it last longer? So they decided we would set up this Python, this linter that would require that you use the 4 infamous imports. It was at an attempt to, basically extend the code life. The future imports are now pretty much used everywhere at Facebook, unless you're Python 3 only code, but that's more modern. And it means that we really had to solve a lot of our Unicode issues, like in the first talk. We solved them in 2013 because we forced people to use these things and they had to solve them. And we introduced new ones because people were writing Python 2 code that accepts strings or Unicode, and they sometimes use base string, and they sometimes use instances testing to figure out what kind of weird behavior you have. And we had to fix those again in Python 3, but they were easier because we made the jump sooner. So these imports would make it easier to convert most of those modules to Python 3, which also leads to one of our other big problems was Thrift. So Thrift is a RPC framework and serialization system. It's used extensively at Facebook, and it allows services to talk to each other. We use it everywhere. And it's that core dependency that if we didn't have it, we would never be able to do Python 3. And so in October 2013, the Thrift team put up this poll internally. We're like, hey, we're looking for things to work on as a Thrift team. What should we do? And it was an open poll, so anybody could add. Someone added Python 3 support. I don't know who, you can't really tell these things. But it was strangely was very popular. I voted for it because I thought, hey, if we're going to have to add Python 3 support, that means we get to clean out all the old cruff, and it'd be a great thing for Thrift because I hated it. But I still wasn't on board yet for Python 3 until I went to a talk that Guido was giving, and it was on October 16th, 2013. This was at Yelp in San Francisco, and he was talking about a thing called Tulip. Well, Tulip would later become Async.io. And I was already a big fan of async in Python 2, but I was really dejected about the different types of frameworks, and they weren't compatible. So, but Async.io in my head opened up this magical future where we would have a single unified framework where I, as a library owner, wouldn't have to make a religious decision about which async framework you use personally. I just wrote the library and you use it. So before this talk was over, I was already messaging, it's Facebook, we're already messaging the Thrift team, like, hey, there's this thing called Tulip, and we need to support it in Thrift for Python 3. It wasn't even, it like barely even out yet. It's not even in PyPI at that point. And I was like, we should do that instead of waiting for Gevent or Twisted to support Python 3. Because if we had waited, we'd implement it last year. So, and they, as a Thrift team, I kind of convinced them, it's like, if you support this is the only framework you have to support. It reduces because they were supporting both Twisted and Gevent and Tornado and some other things. And after Guido's talk, I was really pumped about the future of Python 3. And a couple days later, on the 19th, the Thrift team put up a roadmap, and it included in their roadmap for the next year Python 3 support and Tulip support. So that was my big win. And I was sold on Python 3 at that point. So back to our timeline change. In 2013, we didn't really have any rough plans. We only had rough plans. It was like Python 3 wasn't going to happen. Most people didn't think it was going to happen. And by happenstance, we've kind of set ourselves up for a win later. So if I wanted Tulip to be a thing at Facebook, and by extension Python 3, I would have to be sure that Python 3 was easy to use, or at least possible to use. So I kind of aided the Thrift team with their code reviews and helped them port some stuff. And by February 3rd, the new hire that was working on the Thrift team, he was able to ship Thrift support for Python 3. And then later he landed rudimentary Tulip support. It was so new, we kind of just did our best. But for 6 months, the support just kind of sat there. We had built up this infrastructure, but nobody was using it. It was kind of like these cities in China where they explode of urbanization and growth and economics, but they were left abandoned because they don't have the people to fill them yet, or they don't want to move there. So I don't think we had a plan yet, but we were hoping someday somebody might use it. And that was all about to change. In August of 2014, I had started a project to rewrite a service that I had unfortunately become the owner of. And I was going to rewrite it completely from the ground up using modern infrastructure and modern best practices. See, I wanted this service to last for many years to come, and I wanted to be free of all the crushing technical that had strangled its predecessor. And I was going to write it in Python 2.7 and Gevent. Wait. So I was actually technically a believer in this future of Python 3, maybe deep down somewhere, but I hadn't maybe actualized it yet. So it's like, it dawned on me, if I was going to write my service in Python 2.7, it was going to be obsolete from day one. That one day somebody would have to do the work to undo that technical debt to move to Python 3. So, the thing is that change won't happen on its own. Somebody has to be the first person, and that person should be you. So for Facebook and Python 3, that person was going to be me. And in the words of Gandhi, be the change you want to see. So if I wanted Python 3 to be a thing at Facebook, I would have to be that change. So I started writing my project in Python 3. And everything was broken, as you can imagine. No one or nobody was using Python 3 at Facebook. I wrote a build config for an entry point, and it wouldn't even build. Like, the build system was treating Python 3 like it was Python 2.8 and disguised it. The dependency trees refused to resolve because all the wheel dependencies were built for Python 2. So in that Thrift support that we landed 6 months before, over the last 6 months, people had made fixes that were Python 2 only. And we'd basically broken, we had a ton of regressions that broke all that support. And swig and boost wrappers that people had written in the past and are still and were fundamentally broken in Python 3 in regards to handling binary data. When I resolved enough of these issues to get my project to finally compile, then it stack traced immediately when I ran it, and it turned out it wasn't even my code, it was the machinery that we used to make our entry points work and be sane. So while I wrote my project, I was really having to fix the world around me, or at least the much of the world I needed to work for Python 3. I had to rebuild a ton of third-party wheels in our build system, and every time I needed an internal library somebody in the company had used, I had to convert it to be 2.3 myself. And I had this problem every day. Somebody would check in when I wasn't looking. They would check in a change to their library, which, why would they do such a thing? And it would break Python 3 because they didn't know. And, or they would upgrade one of these third-party wheels we have, and they would blow away my Python 3 version, and they would just put a Python 2 in its place. So it's because the build system defaulted to only building for Python 2. I found out most of these regressions were actually, while they were valid Python 2 code, they were syntax errors or name errors in Python 3 that could be easily caught by things like linters. So I had to kind of force some compliance. Now, I said before that Facebook is not the organization that you can from top down control over technology and say, you have to do it this way. But changes can sometimes come from the bottom up, or have to come from the bottom up. So, well, us engineers, sometimes we can force compliance by being a little sneaky. So I quickly learned that if you act with authority, people will assume you have it. And I think I used up a good portion of my social capital in 2014 and relied on my kind of perceived status as a SWE for software, or the subject matter expert for Python to just kind of let people look the other way. In late August of 2014, I instituted this automatic PyFlakes linter that would run on all new code when it was submitted for review. PyFlakes was good at the time because it had it didn't have that many false positives, and I could sell it as a way to improve our code quality. Since we were already running a PEP8 linter and the 4 imports linter, I made sure that the PyFlakes linter ran once under Python 2 and then once under Python 3, so that people not writing Python 3 code were required by the linter to not commit new obvious errors. So in effect, I was forcing them to write Python 3 compliant code, or sort of, but this allowed me to distribute the job of maintaining Python 3 support so I could focus on finishing my project. So linting is not a perfect science. You really need unit tests. So for those libraries I was using that I had to do all the work to get for Python 2 and 3, I just went and changed their unit tests to run in Python 3 and in Python 2, kind of like I did with the linters. And so maintainers would know immediately if they were changing their libraries that they were breaking compatibility somebody was assuming. I found that unit tests was a way easier way to force compliance than issuing a task after the fact. Say, hey, you broke me there, could you fix it? It was more like if I put a linter in there, they would just not break me to begin with. And it was more easy to keep people to be compliant, or it wasn't always easy to make them to be compliant. So I had to be responsive to people's cries for help. At first, I spent a lot of time in the diff review comment sections of a lot of diffs, like pointing out the Python 3 lint errors and telling people, explaining why the name error Unicode is not defined, why that's not a false positive, and a legitimate lint error. So, and I had to kind of explain why they should care. Like, oh, it's for the future. This code might run in Python 3 one day, and it was always one day. So, but the thing basically is, I had to try to make it easier, because if supporting Python 3 seemed hard to the developers, they would give up. They'd throw their hands in the air and they would say, we can be on Python 2 forever. It's just too hard. So I ended up taking the third-party module 6 and Future, which allow you to write really easy Python 3 and 2 polyglot code. And I did a trick of the build system to make them automatically just populate on everybody's dependency trees, so that they would just be there. So when I came into a comment section on their diff, I could say, hey, do it this way. And they're like, oh, I don't have that module. I was like, yes, you do. And they would import 6. It would be there. They'd have to change their build config at all, and it was just there. So it made it easier for them to be compliant. I also went and fixed that third-party wheel building system so that the build config templates were not just defaulting to Python 2 only, that they would actually do 2 and 3. That removed a very time-consuming process of having to go back in time and basically rebuild those things that people had built to be Python 3 support. So with a lot of those things in place, we were no longer losing ground in Python 3, but we weren't really gaining any ground. I joined a teaching rotation in 2014 for a new hire class called Python at Facebook. It was started by Moshe. It informed new engineers of the realities of Python at Facebook and prepared them for the gotchas that might stand in their way. Because of the linters, the class already instructed engineers that they were expected to write 2.3 compatible code, because that one day in the distant future, we might switch. Unlikely as it was at the time, but we told them this. Well, writing 2.3 code and only ever testing it and running it in Python 2 is not enough to advance Python 3 at Facebook. We wanted to get to a future where people wrote Python 3 for new code and only wrote 2.3 code when supporting legacy systems. So in 2015, I took the matter into my own hands, and I made a change to the class sides and informed the other teacher, I think was just one person at the time. The class now said that all new code at Facebook should be written in Python 3, and that you should never write Python 2 code unless it is a legacy project. And even then, it should be 2.3 code, because either that project dies or one day it will have to convert it to Python 3. And we taught them this. We taught them to expect things to just work. Dependencies should just be there. And if not, file a task, complain about it loudly, or fix it themselves. And that's what happened. So I have this saying, educate for the future you want, not the present you have. I started using this statement to justify the new hire class to become this like propaganda to drive change. Hell, most of the core dependencies already worked. It wasn't that much of a lie. And they were mostly converted in 2014. So everything should have worked. All I really needed was the people to use Python 3 to keep its support from regressing. In January 2015, I finally shipped my project. It was the first Python 3 project at Facebook. I spent most of the year in 2015 selling that as the new blessed, better alternative to the original service. It worked out, it won. It's currently running in service. It's very successful. And by this point, a lot of allies had kind of come out of the woodwork and been known as being supporters of Python 3, including our very own Lukasz Longa, who's a core developer for Python, or CPython, and he joined the company in 2013, and I didn't even know he was here until 2015. And so together with a few others, we were really able to push the bar in 2015. And a strange thing really was about to happen. Lukasz had somehow convinced Instagram to move to Python 3. And so in 2016, he and I formed a brand new team dedicated to shepherding Python at Facebook. Before, we didn't have a team. It was just individuals. And that's where we did most of the work, was just individuals, free time. Now there was only 2 of us, but because we had the name, it had a lot of validity to our efforts. Our primary mission was supporting Instagram and their move to Python 3. And we saw a slow but steady growth of Python 3 usage at Facebook. Internal discussions were commonly about Python 3, and every day we'd hear about some new project and how they had chosen Python 3 for the new code. It was obvious that the tide of public opinion had shifted, and Python 3 use was growing, even though it wasn't the default version of the build system for projects. You had to go kind of out of your way to configure Python 3, and most people just didn't remember to do so. We even used to say that Python 2 will probably always be the default version. Well, not anymore. In 2016, or May 2nd of 2016, I made a post expressing my intention. You never say, I'm doing this. You say, I'm thinking of doing this, and if nobody complains, you do it. So I'm making Python 3 the default version of the build system. One of the arguments was that using a legacy version of Python, I like to say these things like this, for new projects was a waste of company money. Since any project starting with Python 2 will at some point be upgraded to Python 3, so why not save the technical debt and use modern Python to begin with? The post received unanimous support. There were no complainers. Nobody said, no, we shouldn't do this. By May 5th, so 3 days later, I had modded all the existing Python 2 build configs that indicated they needed to be using a legacy version of Python when they built. and made Python 3 the default at Facebook. With the millions of lines of Python code and the thousands of pars, I didn't really break anything. Nobody seemed to really notice. It just was the next logical thing to do. Sure, there were a couple people that didn't rebase, just right, and they had a weird thing when they finally got the latest. But other than that, there was no like, oh my God, this is horrible. In 2016, we also formed what I call the Shadowy Council for Python Domination. This chat group was kind of made up of all the allies throughout the company that were like directly active in Python. And we use this group to kind of keep ahead of any compatibility issues, discussions and directions of the language at Facebook, and keep abreast of any dissenters to our plan. So you can't do this thing like this alone. You really need allies in the fight. Now, there were only about 10 people total that really made all of this happen. And they came and went at various times. We really only had 3 people at any one time collaborating on driving Python 3 adoption. Now, the future of Python at Facebook is bright as ever. In 2017, we are finally in that glorious future where we can have nice things again. And in Q1 of this year, Instagram finished their migration to Python 3, and now they are free to start making use of new technologies. They can use async I/O. And we can, Now we can focus on things like PEP 484 typing and migrating more services to make use of async I/O and make Python at Facebook fun again. This year we started a project to replace the thrift stack that I complained about earlier with a new one that wraps C++ asynchronously, and it's immutable for data structures. It's really awesome. Now we're able to upgrade Python 3 versions without a lot of fanfare. And it's no longer this dark day, oh God, they're updating Python 3. Oh, I'm not going to go in that day. It's like a Christmas. It's like, oh, look at the goodies we have. We updated to Python 3.6.3. This is awesome. What do we have now? Oh, we've got these special types, and we have all these special things with async I/O. It's a wonderful world. So Python at Facebook is fun again. And so the problem that we have now, actually, is that services and library owners are internally asking the question, can we drop Python 2 support? And we are seeing a lot of Python 3 only regressions in Python 2 code. So the problems I had before, it's kind of like happening against those folks. And we're like, well, you need to make unit tests run in Python 2 if you want to maintain that support. But so here's kind of a graph of how we were growing in our support. We started out in Q3 of 2014. We had 4 Python entry points. One was the Py3 flake linter that I wrote, and the other 3 were from my project. So those 4, that was me. This didn't change enough for almost a year until Q2 in 2015 when a 5th entry came along. That was Wukash had written Python 3 service. And sadly, I didn't maintain statistics for about a year. And then 2 days after I switched the default Python, which I have a little marker there where I switched it, Cooper Lees our host, put out an automatic stats gather, so we could actually every day, several times a day, we'd run and we'd actually go out to the code base and say how many entry points are there and what versions of Python are they configured for. So we actually have some really nice data. It was surprised to find out that it was like 3 days later when we ran it, we had 4% of Python entry points were already Python 3. So we have a lot of entry points, so just to let you know that. And they were not the default, but we already had 4%. And today we're at 40% of all entry points. And the green line here, that's where I didn't have any data, so I just kind of extrapolated because I wasn't going to spend the time to actually like step through the Mercurial repository day by day and do the math. So just made it a green line. So that's why you should important to have stats. So I would really claim that this is a success. That it's now at Facebook, it's kind of an embarrassment if you say that your project is Python 2 only and you have no plans to move to Python 3. Most people are like, oh no, we have plans. It's on the roadmap. It's on the roadmap. Because they feel guilty. It's like, oh, and a lot of them, they want the shiny new toys that we have. They want to use that in their old projects. They want to play with them too. And they want to get to Python 3. They're just, they're putting it off for whatever reasons. And they're in the minority now. So let's review. If you build it, they will come. Don't just say that we should move to Python 3. Make it a possibility. Change has to start with somebody. It should be you. Pick Python 3 first for your project. Don't do it alone. You're going to need help. Linters and unit tests can kind of force people to help you, but find your allies and recruit them to your cause. If you're not currently educating your new hires, start and train them for what you want. It doesn't have to be where it currently is, it's what you want to get to. And collect statistics, definitely. That's a game changer. Because when we started putting up we put up a dashboard where you could see the percentage of Python 3 per like team in Facebook. It kind of added a gamification, and people were like, I want to get our percentage to like 80. And like they would come and like, oh, we have 100% in our directory, and in the code is 100% Python 3, and it, I guess show it around like it was a golf score or something. But and finally, write some awesome stuff in Python 3, because the awesome stuff that attracts even more people to want to convert. Like, oh, they have all the cool toys in Python 3. Can we convert? And they're like, I know, we looked at it a couple years ago. It seemed hopeless. Maybe we can do it now. So, questions?
Thank you, Jason. All right. I saw a question right here, John.
Yeah, that's right. When you said you were putting in PyFlakes and other linters, did you do a switch on for all projects once you had fixed everything per project, or even per file that was modified?
Actually, we were pretty Wild West back then. So that thing went out for everybody. It was a Python file. It got linted for both. And it wasn't till like the next couple weeks that we gave you an option to turn them off. And then we highly discourage people to do that. If you turned off both, it was like you were going to get nailed to a wall. But if you turned off just for Python 3, it was like, we've since moved on. We have a different linter.
Different.
It's basically the same idea with Flake 8, and Flake 8's got plugins and stuff. So, it's Wukash, baby.
Okay.
Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody.
Wait, this is an open source linter that you wrote, Ukash?
No, we're using as much open source as possible. So it's essentially Flake 8, and the additional plugin that we're using is actually open source on just my GitHub account, because I started it on a Saturday. So start your open source projects on Saturdays in California, then they're yours. Yeah, but we have a Metaflake wrapper that is written in async.io, and it runs the Python 2 and Python 3 linters like in parallel, and deduplicates the messages. So like that removed a lot of the friction of people seeing like the same warnings twice on diffs and whatnot.
And we like unified the way to turn them on and off. It was really janky before. There was like 10 different ways to configure the linters before. So
yeah, but essentially it's still Flake 8, but like has like a ton of plugins. Like Instagram has like 5 of their own, but these are like specific to like how they're using Django.
If you make it easier and painless as possible, people will comply.
Very nice. Oh, wow, lots of questions. Okay, I'm going to just go what's closest to me here. I'll make my way around. Craig, Python 3, you gave a talk before.
One question that I have is, so based on your talk, it sounds like at the beginning, so Python 3 was happening, and you were kind of reacting to it and bringing it into Facebook, but now Facebook is probably one of the biggest users of Python 3 in the world. So the question I have is Python as a language moving in a direction that is good and will help Facebook grow and scale? And are there things that you would like to see in the language? Like, what are the things that are interesting for you and for Facebook? And do you think that Python is focusing on those things?
I think they are. We're getting the stuff that helps developers reason about their code. So the typing stuff that's been going on is very helpful. I think at the time when we were experimenting, where people were doing like, oh, add Python 3.3 to the build system and see if anybody says anything. Like, I don't think anybody was really sure. It was like everybody was kind of wishy-washy about whether or not they were going to go to Python 3 at that point. It wasn't until 3.4 people were like, we should move, let's go. And 3.5 came out and people were just like, oh yeah, async await, this is great. But I think, we do have we have one of the largest async IO deployments in the world, just because we know that people bigger than us aren't using it yet. So I think the community is working on, because we have our own core developer that.
Yeah, this is actually, I'm going to tack on to Craig's question. That was my question. So you talk a lot about Facebook's usage of open source Python, and I was kind of curious that beyond thrift and also Ukash's salary, what is Facebook doing for open source Python? Because as you know, I mean, Facebook does amazing things for open source PHP, almost overtaking PHP itself with this 7 thing. So I kind of wonder what analogous thing is happening with Python.
Well, some of the things we would find, like the way, before we kind of like started the Python team, that the way we would build Python internally at Facebook and put into RPMs and around the world, they would have these like private patches that they would carry for years at a time. And it was like, why weren't these ever open sourced? Like, why don't we, like, so in our boot camp, that new hire class that became propaganda, one of the things I kind of harp on now is that, we have a license, we have the contributor agreement signed as a company. So I encourage new hires when they come in, it's like, if you fix something, don't just keep it here. If it applies to the open world, go out and put the pull request for CPython or some of these related modules that we already have agreements with, so you don't have to go talk to legal for 2 weeks. You can just do it now. So we have a mentality that if you're going to fix something, just go and fix it. Like, so we do a lot of type shed fixes and MyPy fixes and stuff like that, where we like, because we're using all this stuff, we come across these errors and we don't just be quiet about it. In the past, people were just like, oh, it didn't work. I fixed it. Well, did you tell anybody?
We do stuff for the open source. Come on.
Well, no, I mean it's a question. It's not a rhetorical question.
Yeah. So
I've remembered.
yes. So first of all, between 3.6.0 and 3.6.2, we had patches merged to Python from 12 people at Facebook. So I guess that's pretty cool.
That's pretty good, yeah.
2 sprints.
Yes, we're organizing core sprints. We did one last year for core developers for a week, which was the most productive week in Python's history, which was pretty cool. And this year we did the same. It was still very productive, but it was very different from last year, because last year was like quite before the beta freeze, so everybody was just like rushing to finish their features. This time it was like, how about we change everything? So like a lot of peps were born and discussions like this. But yeah, like twice in a row, core sprints. We are actually sponsoring the Django Software Foundation, like not the Python Software Foundation so far, as far as I know. But yeah, like we're contributing to it. We have people that are essentially working most of their time on it. So that's our contribution for now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it sounds pretty good. But I probably don't need to remind anyone here what Mozilla's books look like compared to Facebook's. They're sponsoring PSF. So I saw a question here. Was there a question here? Am I standing behind someone with a question? Nick? All right.
So it sounds like a lot of this work was, this slow migration was possible because there's a lot of like different projects that can choose to run under Python 2 or 3. But, I don't know if you have any thoughts for organizations where it's really just one big code base that just...
Well, like Instagram gave a talk at PyCon last year, so I didn't really cover it very well, but they talked about, the incremental changing everything over, like basically redoing their unit test for Python 3 and basically going through and 2.3ing their entire code base to make it polyglot. And then moving to Python 3 and then a week later stripping out all the Python 2. So they really wanted to get there quick. So I think even if you're in a single code base, you can start by taking like everything, unless you're in one single file, and we're like in the 80s. But no, like you're going to have multiple modules. There's going to be different packages, no matter how big your application is. It's going to be organized. So you can pick one, and you can go in there and you can fix it to be 2.3. You can put unit tests that'll run. Like you can basically run a secondary set of unit tests that run into Python 3, like blacklist all the ones that fail, and just basically churn through it until you've converted them all. And it usually doesn't take that long, as long as you can put the either linters in place or unit tests to prevent you from constantly having to refight the same battle. You will start to make headway. And if you can convince others that this is a great idea, look at this cool thing. Like you show them like, oh, this is how we have to write this now. And if we're in Python 3, we would just yield from the generator that we're using this now. But in Python 2, I have to call that, and then I extend a list, and then I pass that, and eventually return that list. It was really weird, but like eventually you convince them. They're like, oh yeah, Python 3 is really nice. Like even the enemies, we had, like I said, the dissenters that were against our plan, they did show their faces. Like at some point they were like, yeah, this Python 3 thing is not a good idea. But the greatest thing was when we showed them, and then they're like, oh, let me go and convert all my projects to Python 3. And then they were like, we added them to the Shadow Council. It's like you should come join and be a part of this plan. So I think even if you have one application, you can work towards that way. You can get to the point where one day you can be like, I can do web apps because you can say, oh, let's say half the fleet in this cluster, we're going to make them run under Python 3. And maybe you don't do that immediately. It depends on how clowny your organization is. But you can basically, maybe I can replay traffic to this tier and it'll run on Python 3 and we'll see if it blows up. And then maybe it's like, hey, I'll put 1% of the machines that handle traffic, I'll make them run on Python 3. And we'll see if we have like crazy explosions and exceptions or it just behaves incorrectly and we have a bunch of violations. But you can eventually get there.
One more question.
You talked about all the ways you discovered to move to Python 3 the right way. What are some of the ways you discovered weren't the right way to push for Python 3 support?
Being heavy-handed about it sometimes works. I'm trying to think of things we did that were wrong. I think it was basically when we forced people to use the Unicode literals, but we didn't actually give them any. Like, this was before my time, really, and getting involved, because I remember always having to use them from day one. But we didn't give them any guidance on this is what Unicode is and why you should care. And it was just like, no, now you have all these errors and length problems that you're going to have to fix. So good luck. And that caused other problems that we had to eventually get by later. Yeah, it's like people who are aware of Unicode and bytes, they'll write C extensions where they'll accept bytes, and they move to Python 3 and you have the same C extension, but you have this thing that's like, it's a string field, like, oh, set the name of your process. And it's like, why is it taking bytes? That's a string, right? Or it's like, oh, there's this data structure, and these are human readable things, strings, and they come back as bytes. And you're like, what? So yeah, it's just basically we didn't give people guidance in the early days, and they kind of dug us a little hole that we had to work out of. And you still find that where like you're trying to use some code, and it's like, wait, you're checking if it's either string or Unicode or bytes, and wait, what are you doing again? You try to track down all their callers, and we make sure, like, nobody's passing in passing in bytes to this. What are you doing? Let's strip all that out, and get to the modern world.
All righty. Oh, David, my question.
Yeah, very quickly. Have you considered writing this up so that other people are suffering through this transition, make it a little easier for them?
Yeah, I think the point of this, I made this talk, but the point of this was not really like, oh, this is technically how you move from Python 2 to Python 3, because people have done those documentations, there are modules. This was more about the social engineering aspects of it, like how you... That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, okay. I've given this talk a couple times. I guess we could maybe do a blog post about it at some point.
Yeah, blog post sounds good too. All right. Well, in this case, any more questions? Let's take them offline. But yeah, for now, thank you very much, Jason.